Today live March 1, 2021. World News Headlines. Francis Sarkozy convicted of corruption but likely to avoid jail. 170 U.S. lawmakers urge Biden administration to push Turkey on rights. U.S. to give Americans COVID-19 vaccines before discussing sharing with Mexico. White House. U.S. to push for intense UN Security Council talks on Myanmar. U.S. expected to sanction Russians over Navalny poisoning. Sources. U.S. failure to sanction Prince for Khashoggi killing dangerous. UN expert. U.S. says detentions in Hong Kong show national security law is being used to stifle dissent. Senate to debate on COVID-19 bill this week after Democrats backpedal on minimum wage. New York Governor Cuomo hires defense lawyer after sexual harassment accusations. Clinton allegations against Cuomo raise serious questions, deserve probe. Trump, I can't imagine any Republican would beat me in 2024 primary if I run. U.S. focused on future conduct of Saudi Arabia after Khashoggi sanctions, spokesman says. Francis Sarkozy convicted of corruption but likely to avoid jail. Paris. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy was found guilty of corruption on Monday and sentenced to 3 years in prison, a stunning fall from grace for a man who for 5 years bestrode the national and global stage. A Paris court found that Sarkozy, 66, had tried to bribe a judge after leaving office and to peddle influence in exchange for confidential information about an investigation into his 2007 campaign finances. He took advantage of his status and the relationships he had formed, presiding Judge Christine Mee said. Sarkozy served as president from 2007 to 2012 and retains influence among conservatives, even after retiring. He is the second head of state in modern-day France to be convicted of corruption. He may not spend any time in prison, however. 2 years of his sentence were suspended, and Mee said she was open to him staying out of prison tagged with an electronic bracelet for the remaining year, although that decision rests with another judge. The court found that Sarkozy had offered to secure a plum job in Monaco for a judge, Gilbert Azibert, in return for inside information about an inquiry into allegations that he had accepted illegal payments from L'Oréal heiress Liliana Bettencourt for his 2007 presidential campaign. Sarkozy left the court without speaking, but his lawyer said he would appeal and prove his innocence. This ruling is extremely severe and wholly unjustified, Jacqueline Lafone told reporters. Another trial looms. Sarkozy had burst onto the world stage as a reformer full of ideas who wanted to break with France's stagnant past on the domestic front and restore the birthplace of human rights to a place of prominence in international affairs. He earned himself the nickname of the Gallic Thatcher, undertaking market-driven reforms such as raising the retirement age, loosening the 35-hour work week and adjusting the tax system to encourage overtime. Outside France, he brokered a ceasefire to the Russia-Georgia war in 2008, and in 2011 championed a NATO-led military intervention in Libya to support an uprising against its autocratic leader Muammar Gaddafi. Investigators had been wiretapping conversations between Sarkozy and his lawyer Thierry Herzog from 2013 as they delved into allegations of Libyan financing of Sarkozy's 2007 campaign. As they did, they learned that Sarkozy and his lawyer were communicating using mobile phones registered under false names. Sarkozy said he had become the victim of a witch hunt by financial prosecutors who had used excessive means to snoop on him. Asked by Reuters if Sarkozy's conviction could pose a risk to his position as member of Lagardere's supervisory group, a spokesman for the media group said, "We are delighted with Mr. Nicolas Sarkozy's contribution and personal investment in Lagardere's supervisory board." The former French president is also an independent director of French hotel giant Accor. Herzog and Azibert, who were on trial alongside him, were also found guilty of corruption and influence peddling. Such behavior can only seriously undermine the legitimate trust that the public must have in the justice system, Mee said. Sarkozy and his center-right party Les Républicains have long said the investigations against him are politically motivated. The only other president of the Fifth Republic to be convicted by a court was Sarkozy's conservative predecessor, the late Jacques Chirac, who was found guilty of corruption in 2011. Sarkozy is due in court again later this month, on charges of violating campaign financing rules during his failed 2012 re-election bid. Prosecutors are also investigating allegations that Gaddafi provided Sarkozy's 2007 campaign with millions of euros shipped to Paris in suitcases. Sarkozy denies both allegations. 170 U.S. lawmakers urge Biden administration to push Turkey on rights. Washington, 170 members of the U.S. House of Representatives signed a bipartisan letter sent to Secretary of State Antony Blinken urging President Joe Biden's administration to address troubling human rights issues as it formulates policy for dealings with Turkey. The letter, dated February 26 and made public on Monday, notes that NATO ally Turkey has long been an important U.S. partner but says the administration of President Tayyip Erdogan has strained the relationship. Strategic issues have rightfully received significant attention in our bilateral relationship, but the gross violation of human rights and democratic backsliding taking place in Turkey are also of significant concern, said the letter, whose signers included Representatives Greg Meeks, the Democratic chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and Mike McCall, the panel's ranking Republican member. Erdogan said on February 20 that the common interests of Turkey and the United States outweigh their differences and Turkey wants improved cooperation with Washington. But relations have frayed over a host of issues, including Turkey's purchase of a Russian missile defense system and U.S. support for the Kurdish YPG militia in Syria. Washington has also expressed repeated concern over rights and freedoms. The lawmakers' letter said Erdogan and his party have weakened Turkey's judiciary, installed political allies in key military and intelligence positions, and wrongfully imprisoned political opponents, journalists, and members of minority groups. U.S. to give Americans COVID-19 vaccines before discussing sharing with Mexico. White House. Washington, Mexico City. The Biden administration on Monday downplayed the prospect of sharing coronavirus vaccines with Mexico, saying it is focused first on getting its own population protected against a pandemic that has killed more than 500,000 Americans. The remarks by White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki came hours before Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador is expected to ask U.S. President Joe Biden to consider sharing some of its COVID-19 vaccine supply. The administration's focus is on ensuring that every American is vaccinated. And once we accomplish that objective, we're happy to discuss further steps, Psaki said at a White House news conference. The two leaders are due to hold a virtual meeting later on Monday that is also likely to encompass immigration and trade. Biden has predicted the United States will have enough supply by late July to inoculate all Americans. U.S. authorities have administered 76.9 million doses to date, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Enough for 23% of the population to get the 2 doses recommended for full protection under the vaccines that have been deployed so far. Mexico has vaccinated roughly 2.5 million doses so far, enough for about 1% of the population, according to data compiled by Reuters here. Officials have been frustrated by bottlenecks in supply and raised concerns that wealthy countries are hoarding vaccines. According to Reuters reporting, Mexico would aim to pay back Washington once pharmaceutical companies have delivered on their orders. Mexican magazine Proceso said López Obrador had asked Biden for help on vaccines in January. "We'd like to get an answer on a request that we've already made about the vaccines," López Obrador told a regular news conference on Monday. Provided he's of the view the matter should be addressed. "We must be respectful." Immigration and energy. Immigration, security, climate change, and the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, trade deal were also likely to feature in talks, said López Obrador, a left-wing nationalist. Mindful of pressure to curb unlawful immigration, López Obrador said on Saturday he wants Biden to help secure U.S. work permits for Mexicans and Central Americans, saying the United States needed another 600,000 to 800,000 workers. On Monday, López Obrador said he wanted to broker an agreement that covered all kinds of workers, including professionals. The two leaders could also discuss López Obrador's efforts to strengthen a state-run electricity utility, the Comisión Federal de Electricidad, CFE. The Mexican president has cast the legislation as a matter of national sovereignty, arguing that past governments skewed the electricity market in favor of private operators. Business groups have condemned the bill, saying it risks violating the USMCA and endangers Mexico's renewable energy targets because it puts wind and solar generators at a disadvantage against the CFE, a heavy user of fossil fuels. U.S. to push for intense UN Security Council talks on Myanmar. United Nations. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield said on Monday she hopes to use Washington's presidency of the United Nations Security Council in March to push for more intense discussions on Myanmar. Myanmar's elected civilian government was ousted in a military coup on February 1. Myanmar's UN ambassador Cho Mo-tun appealed to the United Nations on Friday to use any means necessary to take action against the Myanmar military to restore democracy to the Southeast Asian country. "I hope to use our time as president of the council to push for more intense discussions," Thomas-Greenfield told reporters, adding that she planned to have a Security Council discussion on Myanmar sooner rather than later. The Security Council voiced concern in a statement last month over a state of emergency imposed by the Myanmar military for 1 year, but stopped short of condemning the coup due to opposition by Russia and China. Police in Myanmar have dispersed protests against the coup with tear gas, stun grenades, and rubber bullets. On Sunday, police fired on crowds in several places, killing 18 people, the UN Human Rights Office said. Thomas Greenfield said Washington was ready to use its renewed engagement at the United Nations and internationally to press the military to reverse its actions and restore a democratically elected government. But the violence we're seeing happening now does not indicate that they're ready to make what I would consider an easy decision for them to make, she said. So we do have to ramp up the pressure. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has pledged to mobilize global pressure to make sure that this coup fails. Myanmar state television announced on Saturday that Chomo Tun had been fired for betraying the country. He told Reuters, "I decided to fight back as long as I can." The United Nations does not officially recognize the junta as Myanmar's new government as it has received no official notification of any change in government or UN representation. "We have not received any communication concerning changes in the representation of Myanmar here at the UN in New York," UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric said on Monday. "And nor have our colleagues in protocol received any information from the permanent mission in Myanmar on any changes in the government." U.S. expected to sanction Russians over Navalny poisoning, sources. Washington. The United States is expected to impose sanctions as early as this week on Russians connected to the poisoning of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, three sources familiar with the matter said on Monday. The sources declined to identify the targets or the legal authorities Washington would use to penalize them as it seeks to impose consequences for the poisoning of Navalny. He fell ill on a flight in Siberia last August and was airlifted to Germany, where doctors concluded he had been poisoned with a nerve agent. The State Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the possibility of sanctions. Former U.S. President Donald Trump did nothing to punish Russian, which top UN human rights experts said on Monday was to blame for attempting to kill Navalny as part of a pattern of attacks on critics to quash dissent. Many Western countries say Navalny was poisoned with a nerve agent, but the Kremlin has denied any role in his illness and has said it has seen no proof that he was poisoned. After his treatment in Germany, Navalny, 44, returned to Russia in January. He was arrested and later sentenced to more than 2.5 years in jail for parole violations that he said were trumped up. Democratic U.S. President Joe Biden last month called the jailing of Navalny politically motivated and called for his release. He has pledged a new and tough approach towards Moscow, saying the United States would no longer be rolling over in the face of aggressive action by Russia. Washington and Moscow disagree on a wide range of issues on top of Navalny, such as Russia's military ambitions in Ukraine and Georgia, as well as a cyber attack on U.S. government agencies last year that Washington blames on Russia. U.S. failure to sanction Prince for Khashoggi killing dangerous, UN expert. Geneva, UN human rights investigator said on Monday that it was extremely dangerous for the United States to have named Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler as having approved an operation to capture or kill journalist Jamal Khashoggi but not to have taken action against him. Agnes Callamard, special rapporteur on summary executions who led a UN investigation into Khashoggi's 2018 murder, reiterated her call for sanctions targeting Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's assets and his international engagements. He approved an operation to capture or kill Khashoggi, according to a declassified U.S. intelligence released on Friday as the United States imposed sanctions on some of those involved, but spared the Crown Prince himself in an effort to preserve relations with the kingdom. Callamard told a Geneva news conference that what had been declassified from the report appears to be very little indeed, and that's disappointing, and she would have expected more material evidence to have been released. It is extremely problematic, in my view, if not dangerous, to acknowledge someone's culpability, and then to tell that someone "but we won't do anything, please proceed as if we have said nothing," she said. That to me is an extremely dangerous move on the part of the USA. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki said on Monday that the United States reserves the right to sanction the Crown Prince in the future if necessary. "Of course we reserve the right to take any action at a time and manner of our choosing," Psaki told reporters, adding that historically, the United States through Democratic and Republican presidents has not typically sanctioned government leaders of countries where we have diplomatic relations. U.S. President Joe Biden on Saturday said his administration would make an announcement on Saudi Arabia on Monday, but a White House official suggested no significant new steps were expected. "There are many things that the U.S. government can do. The one thing it cannot do, is to be silent and take no action on their findings," Callamard said. U.S. says detentions in Hong Kong show national security law is being used to stifle dissent. Washington, the U.S. State Department said on Monday that recent detentions of pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong show how the national security law imposed by Beijing is being used to stifle dissent. State Department spokesman Ned Price told reporters that the United States calls on Hong Kong authorities to release those still held and drop charges against them, adding that Washington continues to call on Beijing to stop undermining Hong Kong's autonomy. Senate to debate on COVID-19 bill this week after Democrats backpedal on minimum wage. Washington, the U.S. Senate will start debating President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief bill this week, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said Monday after Democrats backed down from an effort to raise the minimum wage to $15 as part of it. The backpedaling did not end hopes of addressing the minimum wage issue in Congress. Democrats and some Republicans have voiced support for the idea of raising the minimum wage, now $7.25, for the first time since 2009, though they disagree on how much. Republican Senator Mitt Romney and Tom Cotton last week proposed an increase to $10 per hour, but said employers should also verify the wage is going to workers who are legally in the United States. But two Senate Democrats acknowledged that passing an increase would be challenging in the 50-50 chamber. The House of Representatives narrowly approved the COVID-19 package, one of Biden's top priorities, and aimed to pass it through Senate through a maneuver known as reconciliation, which would allow the bill to pass with a simple majority rather than the 60 votes normally required by that chamber's rules. Senate debate on the COVID-19 bill could begin as early as Wednesday, a Senate Democratic aide said. Senate Democrats over the weekend gave up on the idea trying to pass the wage hike by adding tax penalties to the COVID-19 bill, after earlier being told Senate rules governing reconciliation prevented them including a straight-up wage hike to the legislation. There are also political hurdles. Some moderate Democrats, including Senator Joe Manchin, have rejected the $15 figure as too high and suggested an $11 target could be more realistic. We worked through the weekend and it became clear that finalizing Plan B with the caucus would delay passage and risk going over the jobless benefits cliff on March 14, one source said. Democrats want the COVID-19 bill signed into law by March 14, when enhanced unemployment benefits expire. Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent who caucuses with the Democrats, voiced hope that a wage hike would still happen. Senator Sanders is determined to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and he is looking at all available strategies to make it happen, a source close to Sanders said. The Senate's number 2 Democrat, Dick Durbin, said lawmakers should look for another venue to raise the minimum wage, but that it will be a challenge. If it takes some 60 votes or a supermajority of some kind, it's going to be very difficult, obviously, Durbin told reporters. Another Democrat, Senator Richard Blumenthal, said he was optimistic the Democrats would find a way to raise the wage, even though we may not have the votes right now. Clock ticking. In the meantime, the Senate faces a looming deadline to pass the $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill before the middle of the month. When enhanced unemployment benefits run out for the millions of Americans who have lost their jobs during the pandemic, which has killed more than 500,000 in the United States. Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris may have to cast a tie-breaking vote in a chamber where Republicans control 50 seats and Democrats and their allies control the other 50. Even this outcome depends on all the Democrats staying united behind the first major bill to come through Congress in the Biden administration. Republicans in Congress say the plan is too expensive and includes things like transportation projects that have nothing to do with relief for COVID-19. It's $1.9 trillion, more than half of it won't even be spent in this calendar year. So how could it be about COVID relief? No one expects a year from now that we'll be in the COVID crisis we are in now, Republican Senator Rob Portman told ABC's This Week. The coronavirus measure would pay for vaccines and send a new round of aid to households, small businesses, and state and local governments. The big-ticket items include $1,400 direct payments to individuals, a $400 per week federal unemployment benefit through August 29, and help for those in difficulty paying rents and home mortgages during the pandemic. New York Governor Cuomo hires defense lawyer after sexual harassment accusations. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, under investigation for alleged sexual harassment and under fire for misreporting the COVID-19 death toll at the state's nursing homes, has hired a criminal defense lawyer, The Wall Street Journal reported on Monday. Elkin Abramowitz, a former federal prosecutor now working as a prominent white-collar defense attorney in New York City, said he would defend the governor and his top aides in both scandals, the Journal reported. Neither Abramowitz nor Cuomo immediately responded to requests by Reuters for comment. Cuomo, one of the nation's best-known Democratic politicians, has been accused by two former aides of sexual misconduct. On Sunday, he apologized if any of his remarks were misinterpreted as flirtatious and said he never tried to make anyone feel uncomfortable. He said he never physically touched anyone. New York Attorney General Letitia James is investigating the allegations. In the nursing home case, the Attorney General's office in January issued a report that cast doubt on the Cuomo administration's handling of the coronavirus crisis in nursing homes. It said the state health department significantly undercounted the death toll in the homes and implemented policies that may have contributed to it. Uncharacteristically, the outspoken governor has stayed mostly out of the public eye since the sexual harassment scandal started gaining traction last week. Cuomo rose to national prominence for his daily televised briefings last spring, when New York was the epicenter of the COVID-19 epidemic in the United States. Before entering private practice, Abramowitz worked as a federal prosecutor in Manhattan, where he served as chief of the criminal division of the U.S. Attorney's Office. In recent years, he represented Cuomo's office when federal prosecutors investigated the governor for disbanding an anti-corruption agency in 2014. He also represented filmmaker Woody Allen for many years, defending him against abuse allegations. Clinton allegations against Cuomo raise serious questions, deserve probe. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton on Monday signaled support for a thorough investigation into allegations of sexual harassment brought against New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, by two former aides. These stories are difficult to read, and the allegations brought forth raise serious questions that the women who have come forward and all New Yorkers deserve answers to, Clinton, who served as a New York senator before her 2008 presidential run, said in a statement obtained by Fox News. "I'm glad to see that there will be a full, independent, and thorough investigation," she added. Clinton joins a number of prominent Democrats who have backed calls for a formal investigation into the allegations made by former Cuomo aides Lindsey Boylan and Charlotte Bennett, who both accused the governor of unwanted sexual advances during their employment by the state. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, DNY, said on Twitter over the weekend that the detailed accounts of sexual harassment by both aides are extremely serious and painful to read. "There must be an independent investigation, not one led by an individual selected by the governor, but by the Office of the Attorney General," said Ocasio-Cortez, who opened up last month about her own experience as a survivor of sexual assault. In a statement on Sunday, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, also called for an investigation into the alleged sexual misconduct to be led by someone fully independent of the governor and said the allegations were disturbing. De Blasio said at a press briefing on Monday that if the allegations are corroborated, then Cuomo should step down. "If someone purposely tried to use their power to force a woman to have sex with them, of course that's someone who should no longer be in public service," he said. The mayor, who has been vocal in his criticism of Cuomo in the past, also knocked remarks the governor made on Sunday, acknowledging how some of his interactions with women may have been insensitive. "I now understand that my interactions may have been insensitive or too personal, and that some of my comments, given my position, made others feel in ways I never intended. I acknowledge some of the things I have said have been misinterpreted as an unwanted flirtation. To the extent anyone felt that way, I am truly sorry about that," Cuomo said on Sunday. However, Cuomo denied inappropriately touching anybody at the time, saying, "I never propositioned anybody and I never intended to make anyone feel uncomfortable. But these are allegations that New Yorkers deserve answers to." De Blasio said the governor's comments were not an apology. He seemed to be saying, "I was just kidding around. Sexual harassment's not funny. It's serious, and it has to be taken seriously," de Blasio said. And he just clearly was letting himself off the hook for something that, for the women involved, sounded pretty terrifying. New York Attorney General Letitia James said on Sunday that she will launch an inquiry into the allegations. She also said her office is hiring a firm to oversee the probe. Cuomo's office said the governor will cooperate with an independent probe into the allegations. The governor's office wants a thorough and independent review that is above reproach and beyond political interference. Therefore, the governor's office has asked Attorney General Tish James to select a qualified private lawyer to do an independent review of allegations of sexual harassment, Cuomo's office said on Sunday. The governor's office will voluntarily cooperate fully. Trump: "I can't imagine any Republican would beat me in 2024 primary if I run." Former President Trump said in an interview released Monday that he believes it is unlikely any Republican would be able to beat him if he ran for president again in 2024. "I can't imagine it if I decide to do that. I haven't decided to do that," Trump told Newsmax's Mark Halpern on Sunday. "I've done a good job for this party," he said. "We had the greatest economy in history and then we rebuilt it a second time and the foundations were so strong that no other country can even compete with us. I think based on the job performance, I'm not sure that anybody should be able to win other than us," the former president added. Trump on Sunday delivered his first speech since leaving office at the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC, taking the opportunity to criticize President Biden and critics within the GOP. His remarks come as the Republican Party finds itself divided, with many wanting to continue in a pro-Trump direction and others wanting to break away from the grip of the former president. Prior to his speech, Trump won the CPAC straw poll, with 55% of respondents saying they would vote for him in a hypothetical 2024 GOP primary. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, R., trailed at 21% support, followed by South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, R., at 4%. In a poll that excluded Trump, DeSantis led, carrying a wide lead of 43% support, followed by Noem at 11%. Donald Trump Jr. had 8% support, while former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Senator Ted Cruz, Republican Texas, both came in at 7%. U.S. focused on future conduct of Saudi Arabia after Khashoggi sanctions, spokesman says. Washington, the United States is focused on future conduct of Saudi Arabia and will expect Riyadh to improve its human rights record, a U.S. spokesman said on Monday. After Washington imposed sanctions on some Saudis for the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi but fell short of sanctions against Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The United States on Friday declassified a report that said the Crown Prince approved an operation in 2018 to capture or kill Khashoggi and issued some sanctions against Saudi nationals and entities. Washington's failure to penalize the Crown Prince has been criticized by rights groups and others, raising questions about accountability and the Biden administration's pledge to make human rights a foreign policy priority. Prince Mohammed, the 35-year-old de facto ruler, has denied any involvement in Khashoggi's killing, for which 8 people were jailed in Saudi Arabia last year, but has said he bears ultimate responsibility because it happened on his watch. We are very focused on future conduct, and that is part of why we have cast this not as a rupture, but as a recalibration of U.S.-Saudi relations, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price said at a press briefing. We are trying to get to the systemic issues underlying the brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi, Price said. The United States welcomed the recent release of 2 human rights activists in Saudi Arabia, Price said, but asked Riyadh to do more by lifting the travel ban on them. We are urging Saudi Arabia to take additional steps, to lift travel bans on those released, to commute sentences and resolve cases such as those women's rights activists and others, he said. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki said on Monday that the United States reserved the right to sanction Mohammed bin Salman. Khashoggi, a U.S. resident who wrote opinion columns for the Washington Post critical of the Crown Prince's policies, was killed and dismembered by a team of operatives linked to the prince in the kingdom's consulate in Istanbul in October 2018. On Friday, the United States singled out the Rapid Intervention Force, or RIF, a unit of the Saudi Royal Guard that has engaged in counter-dissident operations. It also issued visa bans on 76 Saudis. Price said he could not disclose the names of the 76 people and declined to say whether or not Mohammed bin Salman was among them. The United States has urged Saudi Arabia to disband the RIF, Price added. Don't forget to comment below with your common sense and subscribe to your podcast. This helps bring the podcast to life and grow it. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We can't wait to continue this adventure with you. Support us on PayPal. Thank you very much and enjoy listening.